this is Ree here. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate all of you. Om Klim Kalike Namaha. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing. It really helps me a lot. Don't forget to check out my website, paradoxastrology.com. Book your consultation today. I can help you with anything. And if you would like more exclusive occult videos that I don't post on YouTube, consider subscribing to my Patreon. It also helps to support this channel. Okay, let's get into this video. Now, this video is about the astrology of a convicted murderer. And this is no ordinary murderer. This is a murderer who is now sent to death row. This man named Wade Wilson actually killed 2 women and was found guilty for it. One of the women apparently, I think he was dating at the time, and then another woman that same night, I guess he was driving and he saw another woman walking and asked her for directions, and she came into his car to give him the directions, and then he murdered her. So it's very clear that this man is a psychopath. There's a lot of ex-girlfriends coming out and talking about him. They've said that this has been a pattern his entire life, being a very violent person. So I wanted to talk about that because it's very important for us to be able to look at charts and see when someone is potentially dangerous, because this can actually save us. As someone who is a survivor of human trafficking, this is why I'm interested in these types of cases. And also, I want to show you that there is a dark side to certain Nakshatras. It's very important that we know this, and nobody ever talks about that. Now, these are all potentials. Just because you have one of these does not mean that you are a murderer or have the potential of doing that. No, it's the entire chart together. But I'm just breaking down certain elements of this chart and what it means for him. One thing that I noticed the most is having Saturn in Shabahista. This is a nakshatra of pimps and prostitutes. And a lot of people don't know that because we're just told the basic. So the basic would be that it is a nakshatra of doctors and the stars or people on stage, but it is one of crime as well. It is ruled by Rahu. It is the enclosed circle. So the power comes from the circle being enclosed and having the secrecy. So that's why it is a nakshatra of that. So he reportedly said that he can't control his anger. Well, looking at this chart, I do believe that he is a Leo ascendant based on many different things. His face, because that would put Rahu in the first house. His face, his tattoos, he's tatted up like the Joker, which is a very unusual appearance. His height, Libra ascendants are very tall. He's 6'6" reportedly. And some other things which are very personal, which I won't mention because I don't think that's right. So that would put Mars and K2 in the 7th house, which I believe. But even if it isn't the 7th house, it creates this as well. Mars, K2, uncontrollable anger for some. This is the conjunction that leads to terrorism. So this is a conjunction that happened during 9/11. So whatever you believe actually happened in 9/11, there was still some type of plot because there's a lot of conspiracies, and I believe the conspiracies, but whatever you believe, this was a very aggressive act that happened. Now he has Guru Chandal Yoga and Jupiter retrograde together, which I believe is the first house in Libra. This can make someone very immature in actions, especially when dealing with anger, as we have that Mars K2 aspecting this. In relationships, Libra, not thinking of the consequences of their actions. Trouble with the law due to acts and beliefs. The fear of commitment, children, having children out of commitment and neglect of them, which is the case in this particular individual. His dad is reported saying that he hasn't asked once about his children since he was in jail, but he was doing the opposite in the news, trying to garnish sympathy. So this is what can happen when we have this Jupiter retrograde with this Rahu. Not everyone would be like this. Now, this could be positive for some that think outside the box or deal with occult matters, or like, say, agoris, for example, who are a different type of spiritual practice, which is unconventional. You can excel at those types of things with dealing with death. But in this case, his consciousness was too low to end up as a highly evolved spiritual person. He may be Leo or Virgo moon, but either way, he has Mercury and Sun in Taurus, which is the throat. And he reportedly strangled his victims, and one of his exes actually said that he bit her face. Ketu is in Aries, which is the face. And Ketu is also in Kritika, which is the knife. And there are reports that he did stab somebody else. Kritika has to do with the knife. So if you have Kritika in your chart, there's going to be themes around a knife or a blade or scissors, for example. So that could be someone who's very good at cutting hair. That could be a chef, or that could be, at the worst, a murderer or someone who stabs people. There's reports that he could have been a contract killer. I don't know if that's true or not. So I do believe he's a Libra ascendant. And with Rahu in the first house and Jupiter retrograde, it would make sense to have Mars Ketu in the 7th house in Aries, which can be a very violent partner. And this is a Mangala dosh, and it's conjunct Ketu, which is explosive temper in relationships. Saturn is also aspecting Ketu and Mars, which is frustrations and explosive anger towards romantic partners and in relationships. Like I said, Saturn in Shabahista is pimping women in relationships using the lover boy method, like love bombing, which eventually makes him frustrated because it's a mask, and then he lashes out at anger. Now, the reason I say that also is because all of his phone calls were recorded in jail and put out. And I listened to them, and he was manipulating everybody, telling one girl, oh, you're my only girl, and telling the other girl, you're my only girl, and getting them to send him money, telling guys to send him money as well. So he was just manipulating everybody with no conscience, telling girls to send him pictures, and he was selling the pictures. So a lot of different things going on there. Rahu in Vishaka. So this is doing anything to get to the top, and Rahu amplifies this. This is ruled by Jupiter, and it's giving this Rahu Jupiter Chandal Yoga again. This can be people who have the ability to kill, from my experience. I don't think you'll see that written anywhere, but this is just from my experience. Jupiter in Shawtee Nakshatra. Now, Shawtee is the independent businessman or woman, and it's ruled by Rahu. Again, we have a lot of Rahu energy in this chart. The darker side and the less conscious side of Shawtee, it can create someone who's very independent, criminal, who wants to live a very luxurious life, a slave to desire with greed and lust, doesn't care for morals, but can rely heavily on others, as in needing them and needing to manipulate them, especially in relationships. I've seen many charts of criminals who have this placement, who make a lot of money, and it makes them a hustler. And apparently he is making money behind bars in various different ways. Saturn right now is retrograding back to Shabahista, and as he was sentenced in death row. So transiting retrograde, Saturn was within 6 degrees of his natal Saturn when he was sentenced to death. And Saturn brings karma for our actions. So he killed 2 women on October 7th, 2019. There was a Saturn-Ketu conjunction in the 4th house in Sagittarius in Purvashada, which is ruled by Venus. And Purvashada is all kinds of aggressive acts. I've noticed a lot of chart with men having this nakshatra prominent who are very abusive to women. It's ruled by Venus. Venus are women. And it's the elephant tusk, which is used for fighting. He also has been fighting a lot in jail because he's claiming that he is part of certain gangs when he's not actually part of those gangs. And one of the gangs beat him up so bad that he lost his teeth. The teeth has something to do with Purvashada and Uttarashada as well. I think it's mostly with Uttarashada, but it can be with Purvashada as well, where teeth are not perfect. Like there's some kind of issue with the teeth. And he looked to have very nice teeth before. So this is kind of the karma for that. Saturn Ketu can create behavior which is unacceptable to society and can lead to prison because it creates detachment. It can create someone who's very highly spiritual who can detach from the material world, or someone who can detach from acceptable behavior. It can create inner fear based on illusions. And this was aspecting Sun conjunct Mars at the time. And the Sun was in Hasta, and he strangled his victims, and Hasta is the hands. Transiting Mars was also conjunct his moon at the time, which I believe is his moon, which can cause a lot of frustration and anger. Venus was conjunct his Jupiter at the time, and Rahu by sign. Now, this is another reason why Venus and Jupiter can create very difficult situations. People say, oh, they're two benefics, but understand, Jupiter is the guru for the devatas, for the gods, and then Venus is the guru for the asuras, the demons. So when they come together, they have very conflicting energy. And his Jupiter, remember, is retrograde. So Venus was conjunct his Jupiter retrograde and Rahu. So when we use backwards knowledge, we become self-serving. And Rahu is out for himself. We become obsessive and fixated on a goal. And the goal is Venus, which is a female. And Mercury is also here. And it's said that he strangled one of his victims, and the other one he ran over with a car. So both of those things, the hands and the vehicle, are Mercury. And also Rahu is drugs, and apparently he was on drugs at the time. Jupiter was in Jesta Nakshatra, which is criminals and police. Rahu, which I believe is in the second house, from his moon, and Ketu in the 8th. And Rahu here can make someone very obsessed with money, where they can do anything to try to achieve this, including criminal activities. Jupiter retrograde here is giving him a twisted sense of morals, and Rahu is amplifying that. Jupiter is the lord of his 4th house of mother, and his mother gave him up for adoption as a child. This is why I believe he has a lot of hate for women. Rahu is showing this adoption in the 2nd house, which I do believe is his ascendant. So he has anger towards his mother and dislikes women for this purpose. Also, Ketu in the 8th house from the moon. The 8th house is the house of death. Chances are that this is something he did in past lives and came back and did it again. And it probably just got worse and worse. And when you do these types of activities, there's a chance that if you act like an animal, that you will be reborn as an animal in the animal realm. So chances are this is your last life as a human being, or you enter the hell realm for a very long time. Venus is in Gemini, and it shows us someone who is gay or bisexual sometimes, in many cases, but not all. And there is a mutual exchange between Taurus and Gemini. It's interesting to note that he was in fact bisexual. People say that he probably liked men a lot more and actually disliked women. And with this mutual exchange, it's like having Venus and Taurus and Mercury and Gemini. This gives them a strong Venus and a strong Mercury. So this is what you need to remember. People with a strong Venus does not necessarily mean that they have a lot of compassion. You have to look at the entire chart. This is where people can mess themselves up. And both planets are in Megashira, which creates cult-like followings. Osho, Taylor Swift, Teal Swan. I also have a friend who is a Power Ranger. He has a cult-like following. He's like in his 40s now, but he was a Power Ranger when he was a child, and that cult-like following still exists today. So it's people with this following. He has an extreme following of women that think he's attractive because of that Venus, because of the Libra ascendant, the Rahu amplifying that. And his strong Mercury helps him to talk his way and manipulate his way with words, which he has been doing behind bars. His jail calls are available online. Like I said, he has been reported to have so many women and men helping him behind bars that he has developed a cult-like following based on his looks, and was compared to Jeffrey Dahmer. They actually raised $90,000 for him. So it just goes to show the chart has the ability to make money. Rahu in the 2nd house from the moon has the ability to amplify that. You can lose a lot of money and make a lot of money, which he stated has happened to him in his life. That's just an example that you can actually attract money even when you're in jail if you have the right chart. So that's just a little bit about that. I hope you found that interesting. I thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I'll see you in the next one.